Every physics classroom, every children's playroom, every science museum demonstration, every military radio antenna in the field. All of them depend on one invention that most people never think about. A simple coil of steel wire that defies gravity, walks downstairs, and has captivated minds for over 75 years. But the story of how it came to exist involves naval warfare, a moment of pure accident, and a tragedy that would tear apart the family that created it. This is the story of the Slinky, and it all started with a spring that fell off a shelf. Picture the year 1943. The world was at war, and American naval ships were facing a deadly problem. Their delicate instruments, the ones that kept them on course and alive in enemy waters, could not stay steady in rough seas. Compasses spun wildly. Navigation equipment failed when it was needed most. Lives depended on precision, but precision was impossible when your ship was being tossed like a cork in a storm. Naval engineers were desperate for a solution. They needed springs that could absorb shock and vibration while maintaining their integrity. Not just any springs. These had to be perfect. One failed instrument could mean the difference between finding safe harbor and sailing straight into an enemy submarine. Richard James was one of those engineers. A mechanical engineer working at Cramp Shipbuilding Company in Philadelphia. His job was to develop sensitive springs that could stabilize ship instruments under the most brutal conditions the ocean could deliver. Day after day, he worked with tension springs, compression springs, torsion springs, testing, measuring, calculating. The work was meticulous and the stakes were life and death. But like most great discoveries, the Slinky was not invented on purpose. It was discovered by accident. And that accident happened not on a naval vessel, but in Richard James's cluttered home laboratory, where a simple mistake would change the world of play forever. When you have been around long enough, you start to see how everything connects. The most serious military research leading to the most playful invention. That is the thing about great inventions. They solve one problem and create an entirely new world. It was a moment that lasted maybe 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds changed everything. Richard James was working in his home laboratory when a torsion spring fell from a shelf. Now springs fall all the time. They hit the floor, they bounce, they roll into a corner. But this spring did something different. Instead of simply dropping, it began to walk. End over end, it stepped down a series of books that were stacked nearby. Then it moved to a tabletop. Then to the floor, where it coiled itself upright and stood perfectly still. James stared at what he had just witnessed. He immediately recognized that he had seen something extraordinary. This was not just a falling spring. This was a spring that could transfer energy from one end to the other through nothing but gravity and momentum. The physics were elegant. The motion was mesmerizing. But James was an engineer, not a toy maker. He might have dismissed it as an interesting curiosity, might have made a note in his journal and moved on to more serious work. But his wife Betty saw something different. Betty James was not just a supportive spouse. She was a visionary who understood that this walking spring could be much more than an industrial accident. When Richard showed her what had happened, she immediately saw the commercial potential. Children would be fascinated by this. Parents would buy it. But what to call it? Betty went to the dictionary and found the perfect word. Slinky, meaning sleek and graceful in movement. The name captured exactly what made the spring so captivating. It moved with an almost living grace. Richard could have spent months perfecting the spring for its original military purpose. Instead, Betty convinced him to perfect it for play. Here is where it gets really interesting. They had stumbled onto something that was part physics demonstration, part hypnotic entertainment, part pure joy. And nobody had any idea what they had just started. November 27th, 1945. Gimbels department store in Philadelphia, the day after Thanksgiving. Richard James stood nervously beside a simple wooden board tilted at an angle. On the board was his invention, a coil of steel wire that he and Betty had spent 2 years perfecting. They had borrowed $500 to start James Industries. They had converted a machine shop lathe to wind 80 feet of steel wire into exactly 98 coils. They had manufactured 400 units by hand in their home. Now came the test. Could they actually sell this thing? The price was $1 each, not cheap for a toy in 1945. But Richard placed the first Slinky at the top of his demonstration board, gave it a gentle push, and watched it walk down step by step, its coils flowing like liquid metal. The crowd that gathered was immediate. Children pressed forward. Adults stopped their holiday shopping to stare. Something about the motion was hypnotic. The way the spring seemed to defy gravity. The way it moved with such fluid precision. The way it appeared almost alive. Word spread through the store. More people came. The demonstration board became surrounded. Parents asked questions. Children begged. Store clerks watched in amazement. In 90 minutes, all 400 Slinkies were sold. Every single one. Richard and Betty James stood there holding $400 in cash, watching the last customer walk away with their final unit. They had created something that people not only wanted but had to have immediately. The sensation was unlike anything Gimbels had seen. Store management immediately placed an order for more. But Richard and Betty realized something profound had just happened. They had not just sold a toy. They had unleashed something that tapped into a fundamental human fascination with motion and physics. The first domino had fallen, and the chain reaction was just beginning. Think about that for a second. A spring designed for military precision became a toy that captured the imagination of an entire generation. By 1950, the Slinky had found its way onto television. The jingle was simple but unforgettable. It's Slinky, for fun, it's a wonderful toy. The visual medium was perfect for demonstrating what made the Slinky special. You could see it walk downstairs. You could watch the physics in motion. By 1956, over 100 million units had been sold. 100 million. But the Slinky was doing something no one expected. It was becoming a tool for learning. NASA began using Slinkies in space missions during the 1960s. In zero gravity, the spring demonstrated wave propagation in ways that textbooks could not explain. Physicists at universities discovered that the Slinky was perfect for showing students how waves move through different media. What started as a children's toy became a scientific instrument. Then came Vietnam. American soldiers discovered that Slinkies made excellent makeshift radio antennas in jungle conditions where traditional equipment failed. The conducting properties that made it a good spring also made it a good conductor of radio waves. The portability that made it a good toy made it perfect for field communications. Thousands of units were shipped to troops overseas. The invention had come full circle. From military research to children's toy to military tool. But success was creating problems that Richard James could not handle. By the late 1950s, he was becoming increasingly involved with a religious group that Betty considered dangerous. He began donating significant company profits to the organization. The tension in their marriage was growing. The business was suffering. Richard was losing focus on everything except his religious fervor. What invention should I cover next? Then, in 1960, Richard James made a decision that would destroy his family and nearly kill the company that bore his name. He abandoned Betty, their 6 children, ages 2 through 18, and James Industries to join a religious commune in Bolivia. He donated most of the company's assets to the group, leaving his family nearly penniless and the business on the verge of bankruptcy. Just like that, the co-inventor of one of America's most beloved toys disappeared into the South American wilderness, leaving behind the wreckage of everything he had built. Betty James was left with 6 children, a failing company, and a choice. She could sell what was left of James Industries and try to move on with her life. Or she could fight to save the business that her husband had nearly destroyed. Betty chose to fight. With no formal business training, she took control of James Industries in 1960. She moved production from Pennsylvania to Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. She rebuilt the company from near bankruptcy. For 38 years, she ran the business that she and Richard had started together. But now she was running it alone. Betty understood something that Richard had forgotten. The Slinky was not just their invention. It belonged to the children who played with it, the teachers who used it, the scientists who studied it. Her job was not to own it, but to protect it. She kept the manufacturing process exactly as Richard had designed it. 80 feet of steel wire wound into 98 coils. The same specifications he had perfected in 1945. By the time Betty sold the company to Poof Slinky in 1998, over 300 million Slinkies had been sold worldwide. 300 million. The toy had been inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame. Pennsylvania had declared it the official state toy. Betty herself had been inducted into the Toy Industry Hall of Fame. When reporters asked about her success, Betty always gave the same answer. It's not a fad, it's just a good toy. Richard James died of a heart attack in Bolivia in 1974. He never returned to see his family. Never saw his children grow up. Never witnessed the empire that Betty built from the ruins he had left behind. Today, Slinkies are still manufactured using essentially the same process Richard James developed almost 80 years ago. Modern production can create over 20,000 units per day, but each one is still 80 feet of steel wire wound into 98 coils. The physics have not changed. The wonder has not changed. I still remember the first time I saw one of these in action. There is something mesmerizing about watching a spring walk downstairs using nothing but gravity and momentum. Something that makes you stop and think about the invisible forces that surround us every day. That is the thing about great inventions. They solve one problem and create an entirely new world. Richard James set out to stabilize naval instruments. He ended up creating one of the most enduring toys in human history. A simple spring that became a scientific instrument, a military tool, and a source of joy for hundreds of millions of people. Now that is a story worth telling. If you enjoyed this journey into the unexpected origins of everyday objects, subscribe and join me every week as we uncover more stories that changed everything. And remember, this video is for educational purposes only. Always do your own research. Until next time, this is Arthur Lee reminding you that the most extraordinary discoveries often come from the most ordinary accidents.